Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of It. Welcome to Derry episode 7, The Black Spot. Certainly the most devastating episode yet, even after a 10-minute prologue of a clown show. I mean, here in LA, you gotta pay big bucks to see some big bucks do clowning like that. Hey, let's break down this episode scene by scene for all the details you missed and where things are headed in the finale episode. Also, we're having some huge holiday sales at Nerd Riot right now. Head on over to the site and check out this week's big deal and grab your favorite merch. Buying a shirt from Nerd Riot is the best way to support the channel. Just head to nerdriot.shop to pick one out for yourself. Specifically something from our It-inspired series, our Welcome to Scary collection. Okay, this episode opens back in 1908. I'm gonna assume before the episode 3 prologue, which means the reason Periwinkle Ingrid looks so sad all by herself when Francis passed her is that she was missing her papa. When Francis visited this traveling carnival, the freak show was really the main attraction, but sometime before that, the hot ticket was this, Pennywise the Dancing Clown. And it is one hell of a production, with a proscenium stage built out from Bob Gray's pageant wagon with a ton of machinery and pulley-operated set pieces. In the crowd, you do see various balloons, but not many of them seem to be red. The red balloons don't appear until the final part of the performance, when it all falls apart for Bob. The same carnival barker who called to Francis in episode 3 now introduces Pennywise, and Bob pops out of a door in the same way Pennywise would pop out in a jump scare, but for now only has a warm smile. He wears a costume head cap that makes his forehead look bigger, and as Bob Gray playing Pennywise, Bill Skarsgård does similar choreography as he does the entity using the guise of Pennywise, but here the movements are just more natural and fluid, and less of the jerky and sudden motions that the entity does in this imitation of this human performer. The flowers rise out of the stage floor, reminding us of the sunflowers that grow in front of the Neibolt house. These mechanisms are operated by other carnival performers, with Bob's daughter Ingrid working the xylophone. Bob Gray designed this whole show to be a tragic comedy that works through his own loss of his wife, his former clowning partner of Periwinkle. So it actually begins with Periwinkle's clown hand waving at Pennywise from the window, but then as he gets distracted by the adoring crowd, he turns away from her until her hand is lifeless, suggesting that she might have gotten sick, and he was too committed to keeping their act going, now solo, to properly look after her. The routine turns comedic as the flowers shoot downward, snatched by a gopher, making this pretty much Bill Murray's subplot in Caddyshack, like the military trying to unearth the artifacts. Here, Bob Gray's Pennywise pulls and pulls at the flower until he loses his head, which would be kind of some meta fourth wall breaking. That is kind of a cheap gag among comedians, kind of like SNL sketches that rely on the audience losing it when the actors break or their wigs or mustaches come off. It's a move that Bob will later pay deeply for when these kids mob the stage to knock his headpiece off. But now a curtain opens into the house interior where he can see a painting of Periwinkle on the wall and a portrait of both Periwinkle and Pennywise together. Pennywise finds his love dead and morbidly dances with her corpse until it floats away. We all float down here. Now Ingrid looks super sad as she pushes out the headstone set piece, as she is essentially pushing out the grave of her own mother. The gopher now pops back out of the ground with the flower that he took to give Pennywise the gift that he was trying to get for his love while she was still alive. Now it's a gift that she can only appreciate in death. This is kind of a bizarre narrative, but sometimes clown routines do have a bit of tragedy to them, a tradition that would find its way into Charlie Chaplin films. A lot of those Little Champ stories are sad as hell. Cranking the music box is a piano player Francis passed in episode 3, played by Andy Muschietti. The curtain's now open for the curtain call. Now Bob isn't ready for it. Notice how he's taking a swig of booze with that tech operator, and then he goes into that kick dance that Pennywise did in 2017's It Chapter 1 as red balloons now pour on the stage, kind of like the flooding blood coming out of the elevator in The Shining. Kids, now having no respect for this clown's loving tribute to his late wife, bum rush the stage, slap off Bob's headpiece, mock his dance, and stomp on the balloons. And then, in that open barn window that has been empty every time we've seen it in these opening minutes, we now see a lone child. It is the entity, taking the form of some kid probably killed recently. So all the trappings of Pennywise's performance, his appearance, his costume, his dance, his red balloons, and his ire towards these kids at the end of the show are all things the entity will ultimately appropriate to make his most famous form. We see extreme close-ups of Ingrid applying clown makeup, including a little heart on her nose as Bob wipes off his makeup. Bob calls Ingrid pumpkin, just like the entity called her in Juniper Hill last episode. Ingrid presents her new look to her father and does the little bow for him that the entity will later request adult Ingrid do outside the black spot. Bob recalls performing for the big circus and misses the big crowds, the roars, and says the big tent will come a-calling villain again, but this time he'll have a new act, something they've never seen before, Ingrid. And sure enough, Pennywise will get a second act when the entity takes over, and we will hear the roar of a crowd in the black spot as he reaps the benefit of what was really a duet act with Ingrid as Periwinkle. Notice how Bob spits out part of a false tooth that he wears as part of his Pennywise costume that make his teeth look more uniform. Beneath it all, Bob can't really smile that wide. He's a depressed alcoholic widower. Bob dabs his mouth with a monogrammed handkerchief, which I feel like must have been a gift from his late wife. The red from his mouth paint foreshadows all the blood that will stain this cloth later on. But the entity approaches in his child form from the darkness of the woods.
The children seem drawn to you.
We know in past eras the entity took the form of a missionary preacher, so he's always been on the lookout for a performative type who could capture the attention of children and leave an impression on them. Notice how the light reflects from the bottoms of this kid's eyes, just like how the entity's eyes always glow from the darkness in any of its forms. It never blinks once during this scene. Then we hear this scream. The kid claims it's his mother, even though he just said he couldn't find them. And I'm betting this sound effect was designed to sound like a pained scream from Bob's late wife. And that's what stirs Bob's curiosity. As the two walk off into the woods, the camera pans down on Bob's Pennywise hairpiece, the one he could never keep quite on his head. Later that night, the carnies all murmur about there being no trace of Bob and how it was like something dragged him off, maybe wolves. All that's left is the bloody handkerchief. So because there was no body and no witnesses, this explains why Ingrid held on to hope that this reappearing clown was a form of her actual dad, who I guess just went cannibalistic. We circle wipe on the sobbing Ingrid. This is called an iris slow, or in this case an iris out, a type of transition created by slowly opening or closing the iris of a camera lens to open or close a scene, and sometimes to emphasize a certain object within a scene. It was really popular in silent films of the early 20th century, which really helps set the tone of this being 1908. We now pick up directly where episode 6 left off, outside of the black spot. Loverboy Jax is there with Noreen. Both will end up dying in this incident. Jax from being shot, Noreen from getting her face eaten by the entity. Jax tells Reggie, "We got trouble." Oh, another example of the line from the Music Man. "Well, we got trouble, my friends." Behind Bowers in the Dracula mask, Stanley Kirsch is wearing the Wolfman mask. Councilman Tibbs is wearing a Frankenstein mask. And I'm assuming that's Mr. Malkin in the Pagliacci sad clown mask. Kirsch recognizes this white girl, Norma Price, and sends her home. There were a lot of comparisons last week to the juke joint in Ryan Coogler's Sinners, and it is kind of interesting how this girl looks like Haley Steinfeld as Mary in that movie, the one white woman accepted into that club. These drunk white townies did actually pick the wrong airman to hold at gunpoint. They're all military trained and holding government-issue weapons, which would be less likely to jam up than that shotgun Kirsch is holding, and he's not even properly bracing it against his shoulder. So Bowers stands down initially, but then goes outside and does the completely punk-ass move of locking the doors and burning all these people alive. Now I know this mob is racist, but Bowers just saw the little girl who came to this police station with the photos in episode 4 screaming as her dad stepped forward, so they know there are kids in here. So it's just especially evil what they're doing. Now from the moment the door shuts, Andy Muschietti stays in a single oneer, a long take for over 3 minutes, staying inside the black spot for the whole time and tracking the camera to different parts of this infernal chaos. Of course, there were certainly some subtle internal cuts there, like when the can pans to and from the windows, and anytime VFX was used in the flames or the smoke. Once we realize the door is locked, Rich is the first young character we focus on. He is going to be the ultimate tragic death this scene will focus on. He and Marge hold each other initially. When Rich looks outside, it looks like it's Mr. Malkin who's throwing the first Molotov cocktail. Obviously, he's been driven insane by grief for his kids, but some of these other racist fucking goons just followed suit. In the book, the mob just sets the fire, but here, these white dudes just start shooting into the building, shooting anyone who tries to run out. The first Molotov cocktail sets a guy on fire, then 2 more flame bursts come in. They realize the back door is chained shut as well. Airman Jacobs is the first named character we see die here. He's the one wearing the hat. He gets shot in the head. Then the fire spreads to the ceiling. It will be this collapsing ceiling that Rich feels he has to protect Marge from. Hank stays to the middle to try to protect both Ronnie and Will along with Dick Halloran, but the stampeding chaos separates this group and Ronnie asks the band singer where her dad is. We're gonna see this woman later. She does survive and then takes her wig off, laughing from the shock. Then a woman pushes past Rich and Marge's sleeve catches fire. Dick passes them and begins seeing ghosts in the smoke. First a soldier with a bayonet with his face blown off, then increasingly more ghosts of the people currently dying around him. Later in this episode, they're gonna be tormenting Dick and begging him for justice. Now in the book, it's never explicitly stated how Dick Halloran escapes the fire. It's It's just kind of inferred that it had something to do with his shine ability, but we see here he has the ghost of Seski to help him. Also, in the book version of The Shining, Dick Halloran makes it out of the Overlook Hotel alive as well, and he ends up helping Wendy and Danny get to safety. So here, assuming all the cinematic continuity is linked, he survived the sewers with the entity, he survived the black spot, and potentially he'll survive the Overlook Hotel. In the Dr. Sleep novel, Dick actually survives until 1999, until he eventually dies at age 81. We don't learn what he died of, but it is assumed to be old age. Here, Dick follows this ghost into the fridge area where last episode he said the fridge was leaking and rotting the floorboards, so he knows the floorboards will be weak enough to kick out. Here's where the tracking shot ends. Look, if you love a long tracking shot, even if it's made with VFX, I don't want to yuck your yum here. I just am getting a little sick of how go-to they are. It's certainly an indulgent flourish that every HBO director has wanted to do since Cary Fukunaga's big True Detective Season 1 shot. Like, someone's gotta tell these directors that it's less impressive when the scene has a bunch of CGI smoke in it. Like, there was a whole bunch of smoke in the Dragonmont Oneer and House of the Dragon Season 2, as well as Josie's Bar in Daredevil Born Again's first episode. And look, I know normally action-heavy long takes are kind of meant to be fun as these intense spectacles to immerse you in the chaos in real time. Like, all these directors are trying to recapture Alfonso Cuarón's ambitious and technically masterful long takes from Children of Men. But I don't know, we're immersed in a hate crime here. I don't find any of this fun, and I don't think it needed to be shot as a oneer. That's just my personal gripe. I know a lot of people watching this show are watching to be like traumatized by these visuals. Thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. When I was younger, it felt like individual experiences were overwhelming. I'd go through a breakup, or I'd go to a new school, or something like that. Something that was difficult, but was finite. But just being an adult is overwhelming. Anxiety around family, career, and finances feels constant. And yeah, there's things I could be doing to manage stress around any one issue, but knowing what to do first or where to start can sometimes feel like another problem to solve on top of everything else. A therapist reminded me once that the best place to start is wherever you can. Accomplishment is contagious, and knocking out one or two simple tasks can give you the energy, clarity, and confidence you need to tackle bigger things. I'm grateful to my therapist for giving me that insight, and it's part of why we are proud to have BetterHelp as a sponsor of today's video. BetterHelp makes starting therapy easy. Just head to betterhelp.com/newrockstars, fill out a questionnaire, and you will match with a licensed therapist in as little as a couple days. If for whatever reason you and your therapist don't click, you can switch therapists at any time for no extra cost. BetterHelp accepts both HSA and FSA cards, making it even easier to prioritize your mental health. In 2024 alone, over 137,000 people used their HSA or FSA benefits for therapy through BetterHelp, so be sure to use yours before they expire. With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/newrockstars and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Dick Halloran hears Ronnie's cries and almost leaves her behind to save himself, but then he sees Seski, the war chief ancestor from Taniel's story in episode 4. The entity did end up killing her as she bled out, which would have been in this general area where the black spot stands now, based off of the shot later on in the episode that shows how close this all was. Last episode, Dick said that as long as he doesn't attract attention to himself, the ghosts will leave him alone, but now he enlists Seski's help and alerts all the ghosts around him and his shine. Meanwhile, Noreen coughs and looks up to see Pennywise striding over to her. He reaches out his hand, and we do see his eyes glowing faintly through the smoke. Ronnie walks up to him, munching on Noreen.
Do I have face on my face?
Seski leads Dick to Ronnie and to the entity behind her.
Seeing things? Oh, I think they see you too.
The ghosts that now flank Pennywise appear to be from all historical eras, including one poor dude whose head was just blown off and it's still smoldering. Dick gets Hank, Ronnie, and Will out, but Marge and Rich get trapped by the falling debris. Rich finds an icebox for Marge and pulls a Leo DiCaprio from Titanic, but kind of the reverse of it, in that the guy does get on top of the furniture here, and it's fire instead of icy water, and he keeps the lid on tight. Rich recalls their conversation about knights and how they protect fair maidens, and he recalls seeing Marge for the first time and falling in love with her. It is quite romantic, but you know, when Jack did it in Titanic, he and Rose were adults. Rich is too young to die like this, and for us to find any romance in this sacrifice for Marge. Now, there is a theory going around. Given Marge's goofy sense of humor, a lot of viewers think that she could end up being Richie Tozier's mom if she were to marry someone in the future with the last name of Tozier. Richie also wears thick glasses, and his mom's name is Margaret. She goes by Maggie in the book, and she actually disapproved of rock music, but maybe that's because of this traumatic incident with her first love dying after an epic drum solo. Maybe she named her son son Richie after her first love. It just kind of makes too much sense for it to not be the case. Stan Kirsch's car doesn't start, which I assume might have been Ingrid's doing to get Papa to eat her shitty husband while he's at it. Ingrid appears as adult Periwinkle in full close-up for the first time, just in time for Pennywise to take one of Stanley the Butcher's cleavers that Charlotte saw him with in the butcher shop and slice his head clean in half, just like Daemon Targaryen did to Uncle Vaemond in House of the Dragon. We can't show either of those deaths here, but when you go re-watch this one for yourself, it's crazy to see Stanley's tongue still twitching around without a roof of a mouth over it, as if his muscle memory is still trying to complete whatever that word was. Pennywise then takes the top half of the head and just kind of munches into it like a dog with a honey-baked ham. Ingrid says that she was the one who called the cops to the black spot, knowing that there would be pain and fear and that Pennywise couldn't resist it, telling us that she really did think that her dad just did transform into this predatory, fear-consuming form. As Periwinkle hugs him, Pennywise licks his lips and his eyes light up, but then promises that he's going to sleep for another cycle. Periwinkle grabs his arm and he stops and turns his head, the same tilted head turn that Bob did with the gopher to end his routine, and Pennywise drools, probably sensing her fear of abandonment. Ingrid realizes that this isn't some form her father turned into, but rather is something else entirely that ate her father.
Oh, he still lives inside of me. Yes, he does. Why? I can feel him right now, yes. Stop. He's reaching out for his baby girl.
But I guess since he's full enough to sleep, rather than eat Ingrid, he exposes her to the deadlights. We saw these in the 2017 and 2019 films. Bev Marsh was exposed to them. In Stephen King's lore, the deadlights originate from the Macroverse. Looking at them causes permanent insanity, death, or a comatose state, because you are seeing evil's true form underneath it all. And coming out of that state takes a strong belief in something mildly magical. Since in the Muschietti movies, Bev and Richie get brought back from the deadlights by the other losers, for Will, I assume his friends will come together to save him. I don't know about Ingrid though. After the fire, Marge finds Rich, who died of smoke inhalation with his eyes still open. She, Ronnie, and Will all hug his body. Like many characters in this episode, the singer removes her hairpiece and just laughs maniacally. Maybe she got a glimpse of the deadlights too, or maybe she's just disassociating. Ingrid, meanwhile, looks comatose. I doubt she has any friends who are gonna get her out of the deadlights trance, but we know the entity will assume her elderly form in 2016. Her eyes, though, glance over at the kids. That jerky movement that Pennywise loves to do so much is also something Mrs. Kirsch does as an old lady in that It Chapter 2 scene. Marge holds Rich's hand one last time, bringing back the memory of first holding hands in the sewer, that yellow sweater that she wore to impress the patty cakes. Now it's only caked with ash. Dick hears voices from the ghosts who just died in the black spot. Meanwhile, Jax says this if you listen closely. There's some powerful symbolism in Dick Halloran having to carry the burden of the voices of his people who were killed in this awful hate crime. It invites all of us to think about how people coming from oppressed groups have to walk around with similar voices ringing in their ears. Dick says that he can feel that the entity went back to hibernation, that they can follow Sesky to one of the pillars. I found Leroy's chat with Charlotte in the car to be interesting, as Charlotte is naturally freaking out over the 23 people who just died and it all now being brushed under the rug. But I wonder if Leroy's calmness comes from him just feeling no fear from his amygdala condition. He just sees the fear on his wife's face and calmly determines some kind of plan to keep everyone safe. Meanwhile, a radio host reports the fire as a mere electrical fire and blames the incident on the patrons themselves, and then lionizes freaking Stan Kirsch and the other racists as volunteer firemen who came rushing in to help. And you know, in one case got their faces cleaved in half by, I guess, some backdraft of that electrical fire. But I suppose it is good luck that the cover story is that Hank Grogan also died in the fire, so the manhunt on him is off for now. I suppose it's just a reflection of Derry racism, that the medical examiner couldn't tell one black body from another. But either way, it works in Hank's favor for now. We see Chief Bauer's name chiseled off his office door, and on Hank Grogan's case file box, we see this is all happening in April 1962, so we really haven't gotten that much closer to October 1962 and the 13 days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I don't know if we will if Pennywise is this ready to tuck in. Hank's file number was 26401, just slightly off from Jean Valjean's prisoner number of 24601 in Les Mis. The radio show transitions to the song that has a maniacal laugh in it. We have to imagine that this is just Pennywise laughing at how Derry will never learn from its own history. Rose's indigenous group lament the 17 kids who died this cycle now that the augury is passed. But since the military is about to make it all way worse by opening the cage, was the Black Spot Fire the ultimate augury of the 1962 cycle? We do have one more episode after this. Where will we go next? The camera soars over the tree line from the Black Spot to show that it is right adjacent to that clearing where Nekani and the others from the tribe in ancient times buried the artifacts. This whole dig and putting the piece of the the entity's cage in a box, marking it the way they do. It's very Raiders of the Lost Ark coded here. I love how they find it still encased in that turtle shell that we saw in Taniel's story. The gooey membrane of the turtle shell is still kind of sticking together, suggesting that this maturing protection stayed fresh. Marge continues to wear the Corsair eye patch that Rich gave her as they break the news to Lily what happened. Lily, by the way, looks rough, desaturated, and lifeless after holding the artifact with her bare hands when Rose kept it wrapped in a cloth, kind of like Gollum after holding the One Ring for too long. Even her basset hound seems worried. The final minutes of the episode are kind of table setting for the finale. Charlotte brings the disguised Hank to Rose for passage north of the Canadian border. Meanwhile, the artifact from the turtle shell is moved Ark of the Covenant style to the Special Projects division of the base, where that smoldering incinerator we saw the last time Shaw took Leroy in here is being used to destroy these artifacts? What? Shaw explains his real plan, not to tighten the cage around the entity to capture it and then move it to some specific area to try to win the Cold War, but rather to just unleash it and not even bother where it goes. James Remar's whole speech as Shaw is just kind of goofy Bond villain, listing off those anti-nuke crazies, the women's groups, the race riots, the things we've seen on the newspaper all season long as the real problems plaguing America, and that Americans need fear to enforce this nation of laws. So they're gonna open a gap in this cage to unleash the entity to form, I guess, a Pennywise police state?
The fear. It settles on every living person it touches like a fog. Like a goddamned anesthetic.
A fog, you say, James Remar? Well, remaining shots from the mid-season trailer show how the finale is gonna follow up on some of this stuff. We see a shot of the ice cream truck that I noted in episode 6 returning, driven by Charlotte and Rose and Will, and it looks like Hank back there. That's gonna be fun. We see a shot of Lily and Ronnie holding the glowing dagger and Marge running in a blizzard under the floating bodies. It actually looks like in the season ahead shot and in the preseason trailer, they're gonna do some kind of ritual with the glowing artifacts to maybe go into the macroverse. There's a shot of Marge crawling away from Pennywise in this blizzard as he says, "I always wondered, how do you taste?" Then we see the fog that General Shaw mentioned spreading over Derry. We see a mom holding her baby in this fog. Marge and Ronnie are reacting to it. Hey, maybe it's not the macroverse. Maybe this is just what the entity does to the town of Derry. Then I think even more interesting, something bad is going to happen to the patty cakes, and it might be in the same scene here as when these people, maybe kids in the school, are pounding against a gymnasium door in a panic. It kind of looks like a Carrie situation, doesn't it? But the final scene of episode 7 shows Pennywise in his bloody hibernation in the sewer, surrounded by limbs, intestines, and a general bath of blood. And I'm trying to make out this sound effect. What is that distorted voice screaming? We've heard it throughout the season. It's a very creepy sound effect, and I can't wait to translate it. Meanwhile, Will is in the kitchen, and the fridge is a jar of pickles. We know this entity loves to weaponize pickles. He gets a call from Ronnie that starts lamenting the way Richie died until it starts savoring the details with a bit too much enjoyment.
The way he must have suffocated, lungs bursting like popcorn, making my mouth water.
This is what Maddie did when he was talking about Susie and Teddy's corpses down below. We hear the voice of Pennywise starting to layer over Ronnie's voice until we realize he's right there in the room.
I can smell his stinky little broken boy body. Can't you?
I can't hear you!
I'm done being scared!
I can't hear you! What?
Essentially, this is what the opening credits music has been doing every episode, starting with the voice of a sweet girl and then transitioning to the sinister undertones until that is all we can hear. The way Pennywise is trapping Will with the deadlights, he has been trapping us all season long. Comment down below with your thoughts and where you think the finale is going to go, and a special thanks to one of our YouTube members, Marisa Miranda, for supporting us at the executive producer level. Big thanks to Gina Ippolito for her research and writing on these Welcome to Derry breakdowns, to Studio Tech Brian Kim, New Rockstars editors Joshua Stephen Hurd and Abby Freel, and supporting editors Kiatpiriya, Ed Vilderman, and John Costa for all their work on this video. Follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.